moral values and stand for democracy and freedom in order to solicit Egypt's support in its combat on terrorism, or will it nudge Egypt in a direction where it begins to support civil society and religious freedom and human rights? In an attempt to answer this question, the following points should be taken into consideration. The modern wave of violence on the Copts is not a new phenomenon, one that developed with the recent phenomena of Islamic terrorism. It is one that has developed over the last 4 decades. These two have their own separate origins. The attacks on the Copts, their persons, property, and churches began with the Islamization process that started with President Sadat when he unleashed the Muslim Brothers and his attempt to solicit their support in his fight against remnants or factions from Nasser's era. Sadat declared himself a Muslim president to a Muslim nation. In addition, Sadat's cooperation with King Faisal of Saudi Arabia has helped import extremist Wahhabist ideologies to Egypt. At that time, we start seeing in the 70s, those of you who were there, and I witnessed that, you start seeing Muslim sheikhs on the TV, the likes of Sha'rawi, denigrating Christian beliefs and making that or claiming their own right to the ultimate truth. You feel that the public space has been invaded by this extremist ideology. 40 years later, we now see the Muslim Brother ideology has become widespread. In addition to it, we see that the Salafis, with their extremist ideologies of hatred, have become so preponderant in Egypt. The prevalence of extremist teaching in Egypt coincides with the decline in the culture as a whole that we see. If I go back to my own country, I can't recognize it anymore. I think everyone, that's a sentiment that might be shared by everyone. The decline in the culture, decline in education has coincided with an increase in religious fanaticism. We see a society that has become introverted on itself, lack of introspection, tendency to blame the other for their own deficiencies, and in that atmosphere we see widespread conspiracy theory and paranoia, which serves dictators very well. Extremist teachings are indicative of the closure of the Egyptian or Islamist mind, intolerable to debate, and we see that the use of Sharia and blasphemy laws is used to silence any dissent. This is the origin and the evolution of the culture of hate that developed in Egypt over the last 40 years. Until the 1960s, the Egyptian society did not know extremist Islamic ideologies, and I am one that grew in that atmosphere at the time. At the time, Muslim Brothers were a minority, and now we see them, how they have taken over the whole culture. This culture of hate has forced the Coptic community to withdraw into an ever-shrinking space from the public space into their families, churches, and their own small community. The extremist ideologies of the Salafis and the Muslim Brothers, which invaded every aspect of also invaded every Islamic institution, including the Azhar. We see Sisi's call for the Azhar to moderate its teaching are falling on deaf ears. In this context, one wonders if this call is really sincere, and we have to call President Sisi on that. If his call for reforming Islamic teaching is really sincere, why is he allowing the Salafis, giving them a free rein to the public space to spread their hateful ideology, extremist Wahhabi and Muslim ideologies? Furthermore, if President Sisi is sincere in reforming Islamist ideologies and to forego killing in the name of God, why is he not allowing other voices of moderate Muslims, secularists, people of other faiths into the public space to balance the debate, and instead of the Salafis having an uncontested field? If he is sincere, one would think that they would be his best allies in combating such militant ideologies. To the contrary, what we see is in the area of civil society could be summed up in what can be called a scorched earth policy. Civil society institutions, women's rights organizations, Ibn Khaldun Center for Islamic Studies, the press, and other NGOs, both local and foreign, have been shut down. Journalists, thinkers, dissenters have been silenced or imprisoned. The use or rather abuse of police forces, internal security, and state security investigative apparatus to squelch any dissenting voice is unsurpassed in Egypt since its republic history as a republic in 1952. The primary function of a state is to protect its citizens. There is only for any state is to protect its foreign or domestic attacks. When it comes to the Copts, the current administration in Egypt would like us to believe that these are foreign terrorists that are attacking the Copts. We see in 2016, the summer of 2016, we see a significant rise in the attacks to the extent that Bishop Macarius of Minya mentioned that hardly 3 or 4 days would pass before without hearing about an attack on the Copts. The police is complicit in the process, dismisses investigations, and shrugs them away as incidents of sectarian violence. Now, how could anyone reconcile the picture of the rise in the attacks with Sisi's visit to the Coptic Cathedral on Christmas? And how sincere are these visits, or are they for public relations? Why are governors, security, or the police are not instructed to give highest priority to these hate crimes and allow and also suppress hate speech? In the past 7 months, the violence has morphed into large-scale attacks, which includes, in addition to the attacks on the churches and the recent bus to the monastery in southern Egypt, includes evacuation of Coptic families from northern Egypt. If the state is unable to protect its citizens or conduct an investigation, why are they not soliciting help from the international investigative bodies to look at these diverse issues? At the risk of sounding conspiratorial, one might think that the rise in the attacks may be permitted in order to show the Copts what they could be facing, and if the situation was otherwise was different and Sisi was not in place. One must admit that Sisi's visit to the Coptic Cathedral have split the Coptic community. We see now Copts who are rather naive, having wishful thinking, or politically gullible, who believe that these visits are sincere, whereas others who are able to see through the facade of public relation that this is just aimed at the West to show that there is some level of moderation in the government in Egypt. This perhaps might also explain why we find leaders of the Coptic churches, not only the Orthodox Church, several churches in Egypt, giving letters to foreign delegates stating that things have really improved, contrary to any objective measures that flies in the face of these attacks that we have been witnessing. It is easy to realize that churches or religious institutions have been co-opted in the past. We only need to look at the history of the Catholic Church and the Orthodox Church in Russia and Poland to see how churches and religious institutions can be co-opted for political purposes. One would say that the Egyptian government until now has not shown any genuine intention to confront extremist ideologies, institute civil society, or protect human rights. What we are witnessing is a regime that needs military and financial support and is adept at using public relations to gain Western support. Egypt's stability is vital to the region and plays an essential role in combating terrorism. However, Egypt's stability is not going to be attained through winning in the military campaign. Egypt's stability will be attained through winning the hate by changing. Egypt's stability, will be attained by changing the hate culture and achieving a decent civil society with religious freedom. Minority status reflects the health of a society, changing the public discourse, allowing moderate voices, changing education should be one of Egyptian regime's highest priority in order to seek the prosperity and development of its citizens. U.S. policymakers should be sober in forming the new policies towards Egypt. Egypt would have won if it obtained financial and military support without effecting genuine changes, achieving democracy and civil society. U.S. policy advisors, the new administration, and the Congress should make civil society issues, religious freedom, and minority rights an essential topic in any negotiation with Egyptian representatives. Furthermore, U.S. military and financial aid to Egypt should be made conditional on Egypt showing genuine progress in the area of civil society and religious freedom. With that, I would like to thank you again and thank our speakers, and we look forward to a rich and productive program.